The rule for the kids. It's dry, it feeds off itself. I suppose to bring two engines together so they can go out to the bloody emergency. Yeah. I don't know, but has that been privately bought or still? It's just
I'll open the meeting, councillors. I want to welcome those present. And let us know that it is going to be audio recorded tonight again, which is to assist in the preparation of minutes and ensure a true and accurate account of debate and discussion at meetings is available, and it is going to be live streamed as well, so which is good. We've now got Jerry McMahon, who's going to lead us in prayers, and then we'll finish the Lord's Prayer. And I know that Jerry and his dear wife used to be council for many times, so thank you very much for that. And
so I'm in here in place of Father Christopher, who's probably trying not to see me back in India, where he comes from. And we do have a new pastor, and we'll probably meet soon enough, Father Crisanto Mendoza, who comes from the Philippines. Soon we'll pray, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Lord, give the council the wisdom to know your will, so that their decisions will prosper the community of Circular Head. Our Father, who art in heaven,
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
thanks, Jerry. Leave of absence, obviously the Deputy Mayor is here. Apologies, Councillor Woodward. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting, not in June, but in 20th of July. Somebody prepared to move that? August rather. Yeah, I got the wrong one.
Yep, you're right.
Yep. Somebody prepared to move it?
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor Kay, and seconded. Councillor Harris. Any queries on the minutes? If not, I'll the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Issues raised by councillors 3-1, 3-2, 3-3-0. Questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? No questions without notice. We'll move along. Declaration of pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary conflict of interest.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'll be removing myself from the room for 10.1 in the planning item.
10.1.
Yes, thank you.
Non-pecuniary. Thank you. We now want a resolution for items 5, 6, 7, and then they will be discussed after we have a recommendation. Somebody prepared to move. Thanks, Councillor Plosky. Second.
Yes.
Councillor Blizzard. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Council workshops, we had 2. Any queries on any of those workshops?
Just on the second workshop, we didn't have the dog and animal controls policy amendment. We didn't do that one.
Yep, thank you. Anything else on workshops? If not, we'll go down to Mayor's communications. Any queries on those? No queries on those. And late agenda items, deputations and presentations, there aren't any. We now go down to public questions. Council encourages the community participation in its meetings through opportunity for public questions and statements consistent with council core values. Councillors and staff strive to ensure all people are treated with courtesy, fairness, dignity and respect, and we expect our residents and ratepayers to apply similar standards in dealing with councillors. As Mayor, it is my responsibility to maintain the orderly conduct of council meetings and determine whether a question or a statement is out of order due to use of offensive, objectionable or defamatory expressions. I ask members of the public to show proper consideration and courtesy in these comments, and tonight I intend to give everybody the opportunity to ask 2 questions if they wish. Everybody will probably want to ask questions, but if they do, and then if there's still time for people who have more than 2 questions, we can deal with those. Come to the front and state your name. Are there any questions? I want to just state again that it is question time, not statement time. So if you can deal with that, that'd be great. Are there any questions? No questions? 3. We've got follow-up of question from previous. We've got the answer for those there. Moving right along. Notice of motion 9.1. Councillor Roldo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council motion that is before us, seek a discussion with the medical centre in regards of putting a bench seat outside the doctors. And I know there's one there at the outside the chemist, but there is some distance between there. Given the COVID issues that's been in the community and the safe keeping people apart.
Need to get a second. You're moving the motion.
I'll move the motion, sir.
Is somebody prepared to
Yes, I'll
Thanks,
second.
Councillor Cade. Continue on, Councillor Roldo.
Given the COVID 19 issues that's been around and all the safe distance we've had to do, when people, and this is particularly for elderly people, when they go to the doctor's surgery now, the door is locked and they have to ring the doctors to let them in. The issue here being, when you have elderly people that don't always have phones and don't always know how to work some of these phones, is there is nowhere for them to sit and they've got to go back to the car at some distance from to walk back to do those sort of things. If you're lucky enough, somebody happens to be coming out, somebody might ring the phone for you, and that happened to be the case. The case with an 80-year-old lady that brought this matter to my attention. So I'd call on the council to support it. I know there's one up at the but I think it's something that can be done. First of all, let's have the discussion with the doctor's surgery first.
Thank you. Any further speakers?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd like to support the motion. I know that it's of great value in the Wynyard municipality, and not only that, if people have had injections or treatments in at their doctor's surgery and they come out and they've got to wait for a family member to go and pick their car up, they've got to stand it. Sometimes they're not feeling well enough to actually stand and wait. So I think it would be a really good thing for not only old people, but even mums with babies. You know, like if someone's got to go and get a car or a vehicle, they would have somewhere to sit anyway.
Any further speakers? Councillor Foster.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to, I support the idea of, it's an idea and it's a need, but have we spoken to the medical centre, there is space within inside the fence that there, a seat, and they could put a cover over it, could fit inside the front door, just on the outside of the front door. If you go to the doctor now and you've got to wait, they've got a waiting room for you. And I understand the virus has caused some people to wait outside. And I think I'll support the motion, but I'd like to see the council ask the medical centre to see if they would put the infrastructure inside the gate at their cost.
Well, this is part of the motion basically says to have a discussion with the medical office to check that out. But because I'm the same, and the only issue that I have with it is because they take, the ambulance take beds in there, you just have to make sure that there's enough room there, it's not going to be in the way of ambulances when they come, but that can be considered in the discussion and see where it goes. And because closer to the door, the better if you've got people waiting. That can be part of the discussion.
And there is room, Mr Mayor, I had a look today.
I haven't had a look. Any further discussion? If not, close the debate, and there's nobody spoke against it, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 9-2, councillor Riley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is an issue, I think, given the high energy costs that we all experienced around the place, and we as a community are
You're
going
going to
to
move the
keep.
record.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I will.
Councillor Cull, thank you.
With the high energy costs that we've all experienced in one form or another, to be able to keep this community viable and keep the businesses here, it's to seek expression from industry as to whether we should lobby the state government to bring the gas from Port Ladder to Swifton. They all want to, all these governments around the place are all wanting to spend money on infrastructure to do things for each community. It's well worth this discussion taking place. And I know that like some of these weren't here when I put a motion up once before, but it's not only the industries, it's who in the community might use it from there on. And so therefore, you know, the pool's another one that it could be used. But these discussions need to take place to start with, and it's a small step going in the right direction, because if we're going to have a population strategy, we've also got to have some sort of strategy to have work for people to be here. So that's the reason for putting the motion up and calling this council to support it.
I know when we talked about it before, a few years ago, we did a lot of work with TasGas, and what really stopped it from happening then was the businesses in our area didn't want to use it and said that they wouldn't use it if it was here. So, but that doesn't stop us from talking to them again to see whether that has changed, because we don't know what's changed since then. So I'm happy to support the motion, but I know that stopped last time because businesses was geared up with other energy and didn't want to use it even if it came in. Councillor Cade, you want
Yes, Mr Mayor, I believe that the pipeline coming from either to Burnley to Port Ladder was too small for Saputo at the corner, so that may have been a hindrance, that it would have to be a larger pipeline coming to allow more gaps.
No, that could well be.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I can commend the council for revisiting this, which we did some years ago previously. I think it was about a $6 million project, and we couldn't get the customers to use it, as we well know. My biggest concern is, and yes, we can make some inquiries, but are the state government going to go with LPG gas when we're looking to be 100% efficient in renewable energy? And some of the industries that we would think would be customers are using bioenergy at the moment. So therefore, I think the first step would be to go to the government and see what their long-term plan is with renewable energy. And then secondly, to the customers that may use it. But I support the motion that we try.
Any further? Councillor Rattler.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that even though we may have looked at it before, the energy sourcing is actually a changing landscape, and the gas price just went down 20% for industry now, and a lot of people just switched over. So while it might have been brought up in the past, I think it's still a relevant topic if we look at just gas, or if we actually do a bit of forward planning around which energy sources are going to best supply our industries, and they'll know that better than us what that will be. So I think it's definitely worth asking the question, what in the next sort of 5 to 10 years energy sources are the manufacturers and the big energy users of our district using, so that we can plan which one we're going to invest our time as council into supporting, if there's something we can do, and then go to state government. Once we know what we want, then we can ask those questions to the right people. But I think it's definitely worth asking the question, given the current pricing of that energy source in the current time.
So you'd like it to not just do gas, but to look at all sources?
I think the industry will know better than us what they
Yeah, I
need,
agree,
and if
yeah,
out of that
yeah.
comes gas, then we definitely should look at it.
But
And I think since it was revisited, we've also had other players join the market, so.
but the motion specifically says gas, unless Councillor Blake would be happy to change it to any energy sources, which probably would be better, so we can look at whatever is.
Quite happy for that to happen, sir.
Thank you.
I've just got one thing I just want to say. We've been through this process a few times now. In regard to the 4 of the main industries in Circular Head, in the Smithton area at the moment, they were on biomass. Some of them may just put new boilers in place, so they're not going to be going for the next 10 years to change. My biggest concern is if our council staff are going to spend a lot of time on this, do we need to go down that path? Now, as far as there's only one industry player at the moment that's running gas, and I don't know if the others are looking at going that way or not, and I honestly don't think they will with the money they're investing into the biofuel at the moment. So that's where I'm at. I don't think it'd hurt to ask the question of the industry, but I just worry about the staff's time in doing that.
Any further discussion? You want to close the debate then, Councillor Robert?
Gobsmacked, but anyway, it's quite happy. I'm happy to let it go as it is.
We've just got to amend the wording to probably take the gas out and just put energy costs. See, local industry expressions of interest in bringing, not bringing gas, but looking at the energy costs. Alternative energy sources. That's probably the word. Sources, yes, just Smithton. Yeah. Energy sources to Smithton. Yeah, take supply and from all ladder out to reduce ongoing local industry costs, that's it. So you happy with that, councillors?
Covers everything.
Can we make sure that gas is one that's looked at,
Oh, well, that would be, yeah.
just specifically?
Okay, I'll put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 903, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the following motion, that the council advocates the state government to change the right-of-way at the intersection of Britton's Road and Bass Highway, Smithton, and to provide a slip merge in lane out of Britton's Road onto the Bass Highway.
Somebody prepared to second that? Second. Councillor Harris.
It must be a night of revisits tonight, Mr Mayor, because this one was discussed sometime in a workshop from a discussion with Councillor Bishop at the time. And I think it's an opportune time to revisit it, and the reasons being similar to then, with the upgrades of the Bass Highway going on, I think this could be part of it. And the rationale I put together was this intersection has a history of near misses and overshoots. Heavy vehicles need to pull to a stop on the downslope approaching the intersection and give way to turning west onto the Bass Highway, along the Bass Highway. Right of way on the Bass Highway is a common acceptable desired practice. right-of-way would encourage town traffic to use the Nelson Street approach to town in lieu of travelling along Britton's Road, which has a 50-kilometre speed limit through residential area, which includes the hospital, the ambulance, the school exit, and an aged care facility. A slip lane out of Britton's Road would merge traffic onto the highway traffic more efficiently and safer.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move a procedural motion to lay it on the table.
Point of order, Steve. Every time I bring up a motion, there's a procedural put in there. I've got about 3 sitting out 2 years.
Okay, that's,
My wife, I wasn't here 2 years ago. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Basically, I'm not against the thought behind Councillor Poposki's motion, but to pinch a term from our General Manager, I think it needs unpacking. I think we need to workshop it out a little bit. It may have been back in the day, but there's new councillors around now. And part of that is that the consequences, what are the consequences going to be out of the changes? One of them at least is a changed driving procedure, which is we're not used to in the area as well, and what does that potentially unveil down the track. So not vehemently against the motion at all, but I would like to see us discuss it in more detail before we proceed with it.
is somebody prepared to second it? Nobody wants to second it? That lapses then? So we've still got the motion. Any further speakers for or against?
Mr Mayor, I will support the motion, but the slip lane out, there was some discussion in a workshop here about some trees on the side. Well, that'll take them out of the way because that slip lane's going to push it over, push those trees out. No, the trees is another issue, but we're going to discuss it some other time, Councillor Poposki, because there's some power lines in the way too. I think it's a really good idea that that's what it should be. The best highway should have right of way, and what Councillor Poposki's motion was put up, and I know you're sort of smiling, because him and I don't always agree.
I didn't say a thing.
No, I see the smirk on your face, sir. But it is a sensible idea because there is some confusion there and there has been some near misses there. We've only got, we're sitting there at the fuel depot and you just see them all the time. So I would support the motion.
Thank you. Any further speakers?
Mr Mayor, I'm in full support of Councillor Poposki's motion, just due to the fact that it's common sense and particularly with our heavy industry that goes through there, particularly greens. I think it's an important area to tackle with this $100 million that we've got, so in full support of the motion.
Any
Yes,
yes.
Mr Mayor, I'll follow through that. I won't be supporting the motion on the fact that there's too much there that I'm not au fait with. There's too many discussions or too many bits and pieces about it. So I will be not supporting the motion for that simple reason.
Mr Mayor, I'm going to support the motion, but I'll throw the cat amongst the pigeons now. Why don't we put a roundabout there?
That was not the motion.
Any further discussion? Deputy Mayor.
Just at this stage, I'm going to support the motion. I would like the actual spelling to be right on Britton's, otherwise it's not really telling us which road it is. There's only one T on the motion, there should be two.
That's getting pretty.
That's very pedantic.
But I just thought I'd put it out. And I will be supporting at this point in time.
I'm happy to support it. The only issue that I got with it is that it wasn't brought up when we dealt with the $100 million from Wynyard to Marriwa. Now, whether it can come in at a late stage, I'm not sure, or whether we're running over. But it wasn't highlighted at all, and this council put a recommendation through, so I'm just not 100% sure we're going to get into the 100 million. But even so, the discussion of whatever we seek to do is still relevant, whether we get part of $100 million or we get other money, or whether council might have to do some of it ourselves, so we can have the discussion if we want to do. No further discussion? You want to close it?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to lay fears. It wasn't necessary to come out of the 100 million upgrade. There is many funding sources.
Yes, I know.
And we can go down that path. And I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that the motion is supported by the information put in by councillors, as they know it's long-standing. So it's an education program that we'll have to change, but I can see the advantage, and we see it going out of Doctor's Rocks, how that works wonderfully. Took a little while to bed in, then it worked out wonderfully, and it's really good to come out of that exit. And I believe this would do. But thanks, I hope you support it.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We now go on to 10, which is our planning authority items. And so I need to remind you that we're now dealing as a planning authority, and so all the discussion, the next 3 items will be on planning. So
Mr Mayor, could I please be excused
You
for
can.
the first
10-1.
one? Thank you.
And our first one is 10-1, and so is Councillor Kane moves out. Ask Ashley to go through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've got a few on tonight, so apologies if I drag on. So the first one we have in front of us is DA number 10/2019 for a dwelling at 343 Queens Road. This is quite a similar report to one considered last month. It's actually across the road from the one that's considered last month, so very similar issues to the DA that was considered then. Essentially, there's concerns with the lack of separation of the proposed dwelling and sensitive use to the quarries in the area. There's a separation of 200 metres to a quarry that does undertake blasting, and then there's 14 metre setback from the boundary to adjoining sustainable timbers land that does also have a quarry on it. And there's also limited distance to that forestry land, which will be logged at some point in the future. No methods or arguments have been raised to minimise land use conflict between this proposed sensitive use and the existing extractive industries. We also have 3 representations citing concern with regards to having the sensitive use so close to the quarries, and that is likely to have an impact on the operation of those quarries. And so, as per last month, it's recommended that dwelling in this location not be supported and the application be refused.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation? Yes, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Bosky. Second. Councillor Blizzard. You want to speak, Councillor Bosky?
No, thank you. I'll take the summary from the planning officer.
Thank you. You, Councillor Blizzard?
No, sorry, thank you.
You can speak, Councillor Ivor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to move a procedural motion that this lay on the table for another month until such time as we've had time to inspect it. What concerns me in this is where they talk about that it's in a land slip area.
We've got a second for the procedural motion.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
It concerns me that it refers to in a land slip area. I think we need to go, as a full council, need to be going to inspect some of these, because the one that was passed last month, I think that should have had some inspection on it too, and I can't do nothing about that unless those people appeal, it goes through an appeal process. But this one, I think, is, they're saying landslip area. The forestry one, it's plantation timber, that it would have a private timber reserve of which they can harvest that without any impediments from anybody. So the forestry thing doesn't apply, in my view, and that's the reason for putting this procedural motion. We need to go and inspect this, Mr Mayor, prior to making any decision, because I think you might make it just a little ad hoc.
The only query that I'd have is, question to you, Ashley, because we can't debate it now, but have we got time for that to happen, unless, or not?
There's 2 days left on the clock for this application.
So-
We know it's taking before it's gone, that's different for them as their contract.
So if we put it off for a month, unless, if they agree to it, well, that'll be okay, but if they don't,
Don't then, General Liquor or myself would have delegation to make a determination within the statutory timeframes.
yes, that's it. So we couldn't guarantee that we can give it another month. So we need to take that into consideration as well, because if that doesn't, if they didn't agree to an extension for a month, well, we'd be out of time.
Mr Mayor, we might be able to find somewhere in between now and then, if we've got to come back here to a special meeting, over whatever decision we make, then so be it. Then it's your timeframe.
Well, we couldn't do it in 2 days.
If we was to pass these recommendations, sir, that are before us, then there's a whole lot of other things, like, and I use the word, if we was to knock it out tonight, these are the recommendations here, and vote against it, then the timeframe's not gonna make any difference here.
I'm not suggesting it's, I'm just trying to explain.
I know what you're trying to
Yeah.
explain, sir, all I'm trying to, is to work through this system, because at the end of the day, it's those sitting around this table that get the blame
Yeah.
for things that are not done, if they're seen by the community, that's not been done properly. That's the reason for doing it, sir.
Matthew, did you want to? Okay, I'll put the procedural motion and then delay it on the table, and so I just want to give everybody a perspective of what could happen. I'll put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? I'm against it. So for it is 4, so it's 4-3, that's carried. Thank you. Now we'll get Councillor Kay back.
Kristen, do you want to break this?
So, Mr Mayor, just a point of order, with the procedural motion, if they want to agree to the extension, does the general manager and the planning officer make a decision? Is that what we're?
My understanding is that it'd be lost.
Through the circumstances, we would encourage the applicant to consider council's request to actually visit the site.
Yeah. But if they didn't, it'd be, go back to the recommendation.
Yes, thanks. Don't think we had one like that before.
Probably haven't, no, but that's okay. Yeah. 10.2, thank you, standard.
Next one, okay, so we have EA 54 of 2020. This is for the garage, in 62 Alexander Terrace, Stanley. It's in the Heritage Precinct. Council officer did some really good work with the applicant to explain the requirements under the Heritage Code, and they have made some amendments to the character of the construction, given it's in a very prominent location within Alexander Terrace. Council officer did seek some advice from Heritage Tasmania with regards to the best way to meet the Heritage Code. The applicant, met some of those in that they proposed to put timber cladding on the front of the garage, and they've also moved it back a metre or two so it is actually set behind the frontage of the dwelling, so it's not to impose the street front too much. There was one representation that highlighted that it needed to meet the Heritage Code requirements, which was similar to what we had put in our council's information request. So, given the changes that have been made and proposed by the applicant, we deem that it now complies with the Heritage Code and support approval for this application.
Thank you. Councillor Aldo?
I will move the recommendations that are before us.
Thank you. Secondly? Thank you, Mayor. Say anything, Councillor Aldo?
No, quite happy.
Any discussion, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 10-3.
Thank you. Yes, 23, here we go.
Excellent, Steve.
PA 52 of 2020, 17 Marine Esplanade Stanley. This is a proposal for a replacement dwelling. Quite a large new dwelling on this site. It is quite modern, but it is not in a heritage area of Stanley. One representation from the adjoining landowner concerned due to privacy concerns and overlooking. However, there is a separation of approximately 25 metres between that dwelling and the proposed dwelling, which is considerably larger than the standard in the general residential zone. We have 3 to 5 metre separation between dwellings. So it is considered that there are sufficient privacy provisions put forward. Discretions are largely relate to design and orientation of the dwelling. So given that the views are predominantly to the south, that's where all of their habitable rooms have been located. However, the scheme requires habitable rooms to be in the northern portion of the dwelling. So it's been given the location and the want to make the most of its location and view, that's reasonable to not meet those solar provisions in this instance. And again, is recommended for it.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
So moved.
Thanks, councillor Lizard. Secondly, councillor Oldacre. Any discussion required? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 10.4.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is for our section 35 report to the Planning Commission with regards to Council's draft local provision schedules, which is the local part of the Tasmanian planning scheme. So Council took a 60-day application period of draft LPS, used the acronym. We received, I think, about 31 representations during that time. So Council is required to take an assessment of those representations and provide Council's views on the matters raised in those representations. We did hold workshops with councillors about a month ago to discuss the main issues that were raised as part of those representations. Probably 3 main issues and then a few miscellaneous ones that were coming through as key themes. One was use of the Senior Protection Code, in that majority of respondents would have liked to have seen that utilised more. That has been workshop with councillors and it's recommended that be considered as further strategic planning work that may feed into an amendment of the scheme. They're not to undertake that work immediately, otherwise that would set timeframes back for the adoption of the Tasmanian planning scheme in circular head. Also, there was a call for the greater use of the landscape conservation zone. This is really a new zone within the scheme, so we treat carefully utilising it and have not imposed it on any landowners that have said that they didn't want them in there. So that's the general response to all those. I guess the call was to use it on any land that had conservation covenants, but conservation covenants are a different way to preserve the vegetation on land, so it's not necessarily the need to put an additional planning scheme zone to take that vegetation as it's protected under separate mechanisms. And the third typical issue raised was the use of the rural and agricultural zone. So at the moment we utilise the rural resource zone. Under the new provisions there will be a rural and agricultural which has to be applied. Essentially the response to that is council has also prepared decision making rules and how to apply that zone, and essentially those rules will now be tested once we get to a hearing with the Planning Commission to make sure we've done it right. Other matters raised, state agencies essentially looking after their own little pockets of land and looking to correct some zonings to make it more suitable for those blocks. And then we also had some speculative rezonings that would mean it's a strategic change and that would not necessarily be looked at favourably by the planning commission. So I suggest that we set those aside and look at those when we do our settlement strategy for a future change to the planning scheme. Next step is the hearings. So the planning commission will call those hearings in 4 to 6 weeks, and all those who have submitted representations will be invited to have their say at those hearings, and as will council. So we'll discuss those matters with the commission and ultimately their decision makers in this process, and they'll determine whose view is correct and which one will be proceeding into the scheme.
Thank you. Okay, we've got the recommendation. Is somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Bosky, second. Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on the report?
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Can you just repeat what you just said about the hearings? So we're endorsing this. The people that have made those representations will then go, they're invited to go to a hearing. They'll give their point of view at that hearing, and the commission will actually decide about those representations and what the change will be in the planning scheme.
Correct. So anybody who's in the representation gets the chance to then speak to that representation, and then council scheme will then be represented there. So if there's conflicting views, the commission will then consider those against the requirements of the legislation and determine which is most appropriate to proceed. Where everybody agrees, and there shouldn't be too much discussion at all.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there any timetable to be set on our settlement strategy?
Yep, there is there. There's an upcoming workshop on that on the 1st of October.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've thought long and hard about this, and I think there's some mistakes in it. I'm not going to support this tonight. I know there's some time frames and everything else. This council, some 2.5 years ago, passed a motion to deal with allowing houses to be built on small blocks. That we haven't heard back whether that's successful or anything else from the LGAT. We haven't heard back from the minister, and I think the minister, and I do know that it was a motion passed in a Liberal Party conference where he was in attendance, the minister, yet they failed to do anything about it. If we pass this tonight, in my view, I think we're locking ourselves in. I don't see it being very competitive for us, for our population strategy. We're going to make things available, then it needs to be, everybody you talk to will say to you, they all blame the planning scheme, you can't do this, you can't do that. They get so frustrated with it. Right? I am very nervous about locking this in, and I know the planners, and may I thank you for your time and effort to do the paperwork, sir, and I don't wish to take any of yours personally, because that's not me, it's the issue that we see before us. And I think the community, if we pass this, I think the community is going to be quite angry, and therefore I'm not going to support it.
Fair enough. Any further speakers?
Yes, Mr Mayor, it was a huge document, and I'm just concerned that there's been quite a few representations to this, and I don't know, I know that we've workshopped it, but there's just something that's not sitting right. So, I don't know, I just don't think it's really covering enough for our future growth. I know we've got that strategy, but I don't think that we've covered enough in this. I really don't.
Any further discussion?
Mr Mayor, I'll just say that we've workshopped this several times. We've been through the whole problems that have been brought up again this evening, and the processes and procedures we need to go down going forward, where some of these things can be dealt with. So, I'll be supporting so that we can move forward.
Any further speakers? I will be supporting it. I think that, I know that anybody that made representative can go and meet the plans. And we can as well, and the issues that Councillor Wildacre talked about, I know is right. I mean, we always have been supporting these, and I still believe we need to keep pushing that, and we can do that. And we will, because it's something that Council's been talking about for a long time, so we need to do our best to talk to these people to convince them that that's what needs to happen. So we will be given the chance to do that, and as we need to, so I'll be supporting it and going at that line. Any further speakers? If there's no, you want to close the debate?
Yeah, I'll just close the debate. Thank the speakers for speaking. I take on board what Councillor Wildacre has said, and has been a concern to us for quite some time about blocks in larger rural areas and minimum sizes. But I also believe what you've said, Mr Mayor, that we can keep lobbying and advocating to get the changes we so desire to get people to come here and live, and I think that's a must that we do that.
Thank you. And there's now, debate is closed. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Aye.
Show of hands. Those in favour? 4 against, 4, that is lost. We now go down, so I'm not sure what that means to us now, but we'll need to work it out, I guess.
Through Mr Mayor, we would bring that back to a workshop for further discussion with council.
Yep, thank you. Okay, we'll go down to 10.4, consideration of reps of the
11-1.
Down to 11.1, Sharps container. And Rachel.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Council, before you've just got a report for noting here on the Sharps containers that we previously used to provide downstairs. Basically, we've had containers that we purchased that members of the public will come in and gain for their use at home, and then drop them back here, and we dispose of them in a safe bin, which gets collected on a cyclical basis. Through COVID, once COVID hit, the offices were closed here for a period of time. So we obviously still there was a need in the public, from the public to access this service. So what we did was had a discussion with the hospital, and they are now actually providing a bin up there, and the containers. They're obviously open. Office hours are exactly the same as ours, if not longer. They're trying to encourage people to come up there during the office hours when the office staff are actually on and not at the weekend, but they are there if they need them. And also the risk, I suppose, to our organisation here was that we're not trained like hospital staff are in sharps handling, and that was a good service for the hospital to take on, and it's basically been a cost sharing exercise as well. So council will still purchase the actual containers, get them delivered to the hospital, and they'll actually provide the disposal of them within surgical and hazardous waste that they get disposed of. So basically a good partnership to have, and just thought we'd let council know of the little initiative that we did. So I'll present the report for council's consideration.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move this?
So moved.
Thanks, Councillor Wildacre, second. Deputy Mayor. Any discussion? There's a lot of discussion.
Yes, Mr Mayor, just a question really. Rachel just said there was you can still collect the Sharps container from the council.
No, all through the hospital.
You've got to collect them with. What is the requirement for disposal of veterinary needles, Sharps? The farmers inject their cows all the time. Where do they take the needles?
Not sure, Mr Mayor.
respectfully take that on notice. It's not a question that we've contemplated in.
You might have a close associate, you might not.
He's not at all.
Mr Mayor, I'll take that on notice. That's a very valid point, though. Very valid point.
That's right, yeah.
We experience such, like
I imagine it goes in there waste.
I come and got a charge container and I returned to council and I said, yep, no worries. And this was a couple of years ago. But I understand, so it's collection and dispatch back to the hospital. That's it, I'll take veterinary needles.
No, I don't think that's in it. Veterinary needles is not in there.
But they wouldn't know, would they? No, they wouldn't know. You could put them in there because nobody knows. Anyway.
Mr Mayor, we'll take that on notice. Yeah.
I can answer the question for you if you like.
Oh, yes, you're a farmer. All right, no other discussion? Debate? I'll put the motion, all those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. 11.2, Mountain Bike Trail, Lake Orcane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Presented for Council's consideration is a report that follows up on the previous briefing that Council received. The recommendation is to seek expressions of interest from community members to establish a working group to actually identify a key priority and series of projects and actually then prepare those for consideration of Council and advocacy support. So I present the report for consideration.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move this?
Move that, Mr Mayor.
Rhodes, Harris, seconded.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Kay, any discussion required?
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to commend the staff, particularly on, as we can see here, as recommendations. I think it's a professional way of doing it, trying to adopt a working group to a way forward for what Duncan's suggesting here, so I wish them the best of luck, the group.
Thank you, yes, that's good. And if people don't take it on, well then we can't be accused that we didn't try. No further discussion? I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 11.3, procurement policy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Use the proper microphone protocol. Councillors, there's a report here which recommends the adoption of a revised procurement policy and procurement framework which incorporates code for contracts and tenders and contracts. It's updating Council's previous or current policy and codes. The codes were workshopped at a workshop just recently, and the major change is updating the threshold amounts to match what the local government general regulations changed to in 2015. So there's some increased thresholds on. So, for example, tenders now for items over $250,000 are a mandatory requirement, whereas previously they were for items over $100,000. So that's one of the changes proposed to match what's in the regulations. And the other one's around putting a bit more structure around Council's assessment criteria for the local contractors or vendors, which would make it clear that where all other factors are equal, there's a scoring system which will give preference to local contractors or suppliers. First, local to the area, secondly, local to Tasmania, local to Australia, and then international, so it will score and rank those providers on that basis. So with that, I'll present the report with the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions on this, councillors? No, somebody prepared to move the motion?
So move.
Thanks, councillor Aldager, second. Councillor Woski. Any discussion, debate? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. 11.4, small grants. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, for your consideration tonight, councillors, is the Community Small Grant Scheme. It's the first round of the newly adopted guidelines and process. So there was a group that sat and looked at the applications that included Councillor Ives Harris and Councillor Evelyn, and myself and Deb Mainwaring. We looked through those applications, assessed them against the criteria. We had 6 applications and there are 4 for your consideration. Discussed this at a workshop around the, in more detail, each of the applications. The applications, there is a total of $10,637 and a few cents in grants being offered. That will deliver projects with a value of over $40,000. So a really good investment in terms of the funding that goes from council and how that helps to activate other funds within the community to deliver things. So I present this report for your consideration.
Thank you. You've got the recommendation. Councillor Oldham, you happy to move it?
Happy to move, sir.
Second?
Yes.
Councillor Blizzard. Any discussion? No discussion? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
It's carried. 12.1, financial reports.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. Councillors, before you, we have the financial reports for the period ending 31st of August 2020. To about page 601, we received 6 applications for first home owners grants, which means we have 7 in total for this financial year so far, which is pleasing. We have the special committee closing reserve balances on that same page. In terms of the comprehensive income statement, we currently have a surplus of $7.2 million compared to the budget of $1.18 million loss. That's due to, it's being raised on the 1st of July each year. In terms of the statement of financial position, we currently have community equity of $228 million. At the bottom of that page, we have the investment summary with $9.1 million at core and term profits at the moment. Over to receivables, we've got a proportion uncollected there of 43.39%, and obviously with impacts of COVID and we've had probably a slower take up in terms of rates outstanding at this point in time. Also, yeah, obviously we've got arrangements and things like that in place. We've had the first instalment and the discount period. So that'll be interesting as the year goes by and things start to pick up again, and depending on borders and economy and things like that, how all that goes. So we'll monitor that each month. Sundry debtors are roughly the same compared to this time last year, at $337,000. And we currently have a cash balance of $16.2 million, which includes those investments I spoke about before. We have the cash and investments comparison compared to the last 2 years. And probably the last thing I'll mention is that we had our audit a couple of weeks ago. We're actually still going on that. It's been reviewed with our auditors with the Tas Audit Office on Monday. So we're hoping that by the end of next week that will all be wrapped up and okay, Mr. Mayor. So I'll present the report. Council consideration.
Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to ask Rachel, on the loss of the disposal of assets, $294,000, what was that a major item on page?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's last financial year. What the loss on disposal actually was the value of the asset that's left over when it gets disposed of. So it's really the written down value of the asset, and what that one was in particular was the Trotter Recreation Ground when it was transferred back to the Crown. So that was the value that we still had on our books, the undepreciated value that we still had on our books. So yeah, when we transferred that off and we disposed of it, that brings up the rest of the expense. Yeah, so that's what that was.
Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question to the Manager Finance. I can't quite read the title for you, I think. Madam, what effect is the businesses that are closed in town, shops closing down, what effect does that have on the rates? You might not be able to answer that in an open meeting, you might like to take it on notice. It was a question that was asked of us just recently, whether this is the right place to be doing that, you might think.
In terms of whether it's a leased property or an owned property as well, that's probably another question. If it's an owned property, then access to other sources of income to be able to pay rates. We're in the same boat as somebody, not if they aren't able to pay it, in terms of, there's a three-year leeway before things are able to be sold up and things like that. But no doubt our rates officer would be working with those people in terms of payment arrangements to make sure that they're making some regular payments if they are able to. And if not, then I'm sure in their own mind, if they're not being able to service those properties, then some decisions would need to be made themselves.
Supplementary, Mr. Mayor, to the question. Most businesses, correct me if I'm wrong, but most businesses I understand are paid on, like the rates are actually based on turnover as much as like we used to talk to him as an example, and I'm not picking on them or anything like that. But you said, is that how they're rated, or are they rated on the same as everybody else?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've got a across the board flat fee, not flat fee, but a cent in the dollar based on the AAV of your property. So, say somebody that's a large industrial or commercial property would probably have a higher income earning capacity if that was rented out, basically, and that's what your assessed annual value is. So the rates are based on that, whereas say a residential property might only be worth $200,000 or $300,000, so rates are less than that.
So the question is, does occupancy of a house change the AAV or a business? And I don't believe it would.
No, it's
The only time it changes if the year that they do the revaluations, if shops are closed, that would probably affect how they're, it doesn't.
No, it's based on, it's nearly the bricks, the valuation of bricks and mortar.
So it wouldn't change too
No,
much.
and depending on, they go on sales back,
Yes.
of like properties, comparison sales in an appropriate area.
Yeah, okay.
So, depending on what's going on in the market, obviously if residential properties are selling, say if you're in Hobart at the moment, your rates, your valuation in Hobart will go up depending on what's happening in the market, because obviously the sale prices are, it's the same that happened on here with those middle type of farms. Last revaluation cycle, they've made plenty of sales. Evidence in that area that actually gone up substantially, well above what the rest of the municipality, so they've got a bigger burden of rates in that time, so, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, that's okay, just give me some clarification.
So do I still need to answer anything in terms of one notice or?
No, you did,
all good.
thank you very much.
No worries, thanks.
Okay, prepared to make the recommendation. Oh, you're happy to second?
No, well, yeah, I am, but I've got a question.
Yeah, you can still have a question, but you'll second it?
No, yeah,
Right, I'll come with the question.
Oh, what's that?
I didn't think you said that.
My question is on page 601, our councillors' committees, and I've raised this before, but I'm not comfortable, are holding 138,000 in finance, and most of them had their annual meeting now. With our budget from within council probably of another 100,000, which will put us up somewhere near 250,000, where we've got sort of earmarked for infrastructure. Have council any knowledge of how the committees are going to spend the money with any forward plans? And should we get that knowledge? Because I find year to year that this amount of money is always left over. So we're giving them money that we're hoping that they come up with some community events and all the rest of it. And we've got an infrastructure fund that our maintenance man does. So I'd just like to know more clarity of where we spend that money and what's going to be used for in the next 12 months.
They're probably all different. I think we'd have to go and ask them what their intentions were, but we've never done that before. Some would be probably keeping it there because you're going to do up a kitchen or do something up somewhere down the track, but I wouldn't be sure what they'd be doing, but we've never asked them to do it. If we wanted to do it, I think the council would need to move a recommendation that we find out, but we haven't asked them to do that at this point in time. We've got to remember that these people are all volunteers and we probably need to respect what they do.
And also, sir, they do raise their own money too. I
Yes,
appreciate that,
a lot
but
of them do.
we've got a large amount of money there.
Well, we have, but a lot of it has actually been raised by the people, not by, certainly not by our rates or whatever. It's actually raised by the committees, and so I'd be a little loath to do it, but I'm in your hands. Councillor Riley.
Mr Mayor, if I just might add, these committees, there's not many had their annual meetings because of COVID. They haven't been able to because and some of the things are not being used either at the present time, so it'll be a different thing another year.
I think we ought to have a look, yeah.
To include that in the budget process for next year, because I know, Deb does the consultation, a lot of that with the committees, to help, in working out what their plan is for the next 12 months, but in terms of the next period of time after that, it's definitely a question we could ask during that process.
Mr Mayor, I'm not querying, I'm querying the amount, but I'm not saying it's not the right amount.
No,
I just want to know what they've got
they could
planned
ask.
for the future, and where the expenses, no doubt some of that will be council expenses as well.
So you'll talk to Deb and gently see whether we can sort of get something from them.
Are we okay to do that as a motion?
Well, I don't know if you're happy to talk to them about it.
Just don't want to get involved, that's fine.
Yeah.
You'll be right, yeah.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We now come down to senior management.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Monthly report is presented for council's information. There's some advice there in relation to the Fire Services Act review, the community grants scheme that the council has just previously dealt with. Also some notes there in relation to social recovery and the Walk This Way program. The health and wellbeing program through the Health Tasmanian grant as a reference there. Councils will be aware that the Charts Festival is in full operation as we speak. You'll note there that the sounds around town and the ukulele workshops are sold out by the notice that's in the report there. From my understanding, there's some very good participation in terms of a number of those projects and programs, and we'll no doubt hear a wind up of that following the conclusion of the Charts Festival. The science gig has a reference there in terms of the activities that were held in that space. From my understanding, there was good participation given the COVID challenges that the team faced there. The Health Tasmania grant, Norwich Community Lunches is referenced and is scheduled there for Sunday the 27th. They will hold their first lunch at the Community Recreation Centre. Seniors Week is also referenced in relation to 12th to the 18th of October with a reference there to the Stanley Town Hall. Youth activities are listed as well under Chill. The group's been very active. You'll notice that there's a small note there in relation to the 7up Youth Centre. With social distancing, a limit of 15 people, that's still functioning. We'll also note there the advice in relation to improving the playing fields grant, the standing multi-purpose building mining project. Great photograph in the report showing the work that's been undertaken there. We'll also note the information there from the Swirl program. And in emergency management, we haven't got any information. In the tourism space, there's a number of dot points there from Kim in relation to what's been happening around that particular activity, and I would present the report for council's consideration. If there's any questions on the information bulletin, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, councillor Aldo.
Quite happy to move this report, but first of all, we need to deal with the second item here, this fire service levy, where they're seeking the increase in the fire service levy. The government came to us, made statements to every council in Tasmania about not increasing rates with the onset of the COVID. We've done that. I think it's a bit rich for them to be coming to us now, wanting, or the department's coming to us now, wanting us to increase the levy, fire service levy. Now, if it needs a motion to, along those lines, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move that.
I'm not sure, do we need a,
If council is of the mind to pursue something in that area, a motion would be the best way forward.
or deal with it,
Through you, Mr Mayor, it probably just might be worth putting the context that Legato making a submission on that. There was two parts of it. One was to combine the fire and emergency services together, and as a result of that, to take the funding of that via a rate-based levy similar to the fire service levy.
I don't know that that's what the way I observe it.
That's the proposal that they're
Yeah,
looking
I
at.
understand, I heard what you said.
And I just think, particularly Legato at the moment, is making submission around the transparency of not making any cost shifting as part of that rating requirement, so that, you know, money that was previously being funded out of other government revenues not now funded by a rate-based levy. There would be some, differ across communities, there'll be some changes in how SES units are funded. So at the moment, the general rate part does fund that through council's funding of those programs. So that would become funded by that levy. So I guess the observation would be we need to probably get the wording right about which aspects of the thing we would like to make.
I'm happy to leave it if you're comfortable with what you've just said, sir. But if you think that we should have a motion from this council.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think it would be quite okay to have a motion to say that you would be concerned about any cost shifting from a rate.
This council concerns itself with any cost shifting that might take place with this activity. Is that the right?
I think so.
Yeah. Would you believe that, sir?
well, we've already got a motion on general managers to do that, and then we'll do, well, unless you want to include that in the general manager's report, you could actually do that.
I did say that I would move the recommendation, but first of all, wanted to deal with that first. So the recommendation's actually not been moved yet, sir, because I didn't formally do that.
So you're happy to move the recommendation with one, the notes of the monthly meeting, and two, that we write to the government and talk about the cost.
Do you, sir, require that as a separate motion rather than noting this report?
Well, I think you'd include it in both, Mr.
Yeah, I think you just put it.
I'm only seeking some advice.
We'll make that as a number 2, so all we need to do is get the wording right. For item 2.
Reiterate the...
Council reiterates that they don't want to see any cost shifting by amalgamating on any cost shifting on the council by the amalgamation of the SES and the fire service. Is that the right?
Yeah. Let's have a look. Council reiterates that there should not be any cost shifting.
From state to council.
It's the council in rate payers.
Or state to council.
Or we'll just say as a consequence.
Yeah.
Should
Two councils as a consequence.
as a consequence of changes to the fire services act.
Yep.
Okay, we've got it there, councillors, prepared to second it?
Happy to second that,
Councillor
Mr Mayor.
Thanks, councillor. So it's moved by councillor Roldaker and seconded by councillor Benson. Is there any further discussion on that or anything else in the report?
Yes.
Councillor
Oh,
Hoskin and Councillor. Councillor Hoskin, then we'll go the other way.
I just had a question if there were any more discussions, and relationships with the ConocoPhillips letter that was included in the information bulletin.
Through Mr Mayor, no, haven't had any further discussions in relation to that. You'll notice from the map that it's in an area that's out in the Strait. A number of people have expressed concern about it because it is seismic testing and it essentially disturbs the ecosystems to a large extent. But no further follow-up in relation to that.
Thank you.
Councillor Hoskin.
I'd just like to make a note about the Health Tasmania grant and our days when we're going to have the luncheon. I would just like to ask the council to, if they could notify the new arrivals that we've got working in the district that such is on, and try and encourage them to come, whether that's individually or through their employees. And I'm thinking of our industries like Britons and Greenhams and Saputo, if they have any, and our corporate farmers. We need to get those people in so that we can understand.
Anything further on the general manager?
I just want to commend the team that's put the Charts Pop-Up Gallery together. They've done an awesome job down there, and I commend them on that. And also the Chill team for running the Out of Shadows Walk. They've done a fantastic job that night. I just want to commend them for what they've done and congratulate them.
Anything further? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 13.6, Circular Education and Training Consultative Committee. Minutes of the meeting in July.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Owens Harris. Any questions on this?
There was a question, Mr Mayor, within the minutes, it said about the stimulus funding for construction, and the question was asked who's going to train them, and I just think it's an important question in the fact that there's a lot of money throughout our state going into the construction sector, and I think that training's essential. I think it's a great concept what the state's got, but in saying that we actually want to get something from it instead of just new houses.
Yes, it's certainly an important question, there's no doubt about that. Which is, you're discussing that at the next meeting with councils are invited to, or part thereof?
It will be part of the next meeting as far as we realise that we have a lack of trainers to do that. It's been an issue pretty much most of this year, in fact, and we thought that we had some things in place and they have all fallen over. So we've had applications in and they've been denied, and so we're looking at other avenues, and we are putting a plan together now to really take some more serious steps, because we're supposed to be having a boom in certain industries and we have no trainers, so it'd be great.
And if any councillors can go, I can't make it because I've got a water on that same day, it's at the same time, so it's next Thursday. So if anybody who can come, that would be good.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to make a comment on the minutes. In reading it, it just seemed like a lot of frustration by the people presenting and that they're getting nowhere. And I just heard what Councillor Etland said, that they've got a plan to put in place. Whether we need to back them somehow or hear what feedback will be from the plan, because it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and the frustration comes through in the minutes that they haven't done anything. So either we need to move in and help them and put pressure on the state government and try and get some outcomes from the plan that they're trying to develop. It's no good just having going round and round circles of show and tell. We want to see outcomes. So we'll wait for your report.
We would welcome council's support and interest in the topic. Thank you.
It's been an issue for a long time. I mean, I know every minister that's come that Scott and I have spoken to over the last 12 months, that's been ahead of our list, but we don't seem to be getting anywhere, which is frustrating.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to ask Councillor Etlin, in regards to the hospitality courses, it seems like they're not going to go ahead this year with reading the, training for hospitality year 10. It seems to be a whole different aspect now with children or school leavers wanting to go out into the workforce and just get a job instead of, training.
Yeah, if this is the topic that you're referring to, I understand that there are some people at the hospital who would like to go and get qualifications within the vet system, but they're not able to do that because of a rule that the Department of Education has. Whereas independent schools have a bit more flexibility there, if that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
So there are people on the TEDx committee who are looking into that. And Sharon Walters is your best person if you want to follow that up with another question. But we are trying to do what we can there, but again, it's sort of the department and trying to deal with it.
Okay, anything else on that? If not, I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour? Aye. Against carried. We now come down to 13.7, which is the Heritage Centre. The recommendation is actually incorrect on this one. It's not the superintendent.
That's been changed.
That's been changed up there, good, thank you. Somebody prepared to move that?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kay, seconded. Deputy Mayor, any questions? If not, I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour? Aye. Against carried. 13.8, Northern Area Management Committee. Needs a meeting. I'll be prepared to move that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, seconded.
It's not actually. No, there isn't. There's no financial report. Mr. Mayor.
Oh, just a financial
Probably
report.
just needs a recommendation to reflect that it's to note the financial report.
Okay, yep. Sorry. So it's not 2 minutes, it's just a financial report, so just the recommendation will need to be changed just to deal with the financial report. And, do I get a second for it? You moved it. Seconded. Who's Councillor Popovski? Councillor Popovski. Just get this out before we go on. It's not the agenda. And it's not the minutes. That's it. Okay, I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour? Aye. Against carried.
Just keep scrolling.
Yeah, circulated community roads safety program. Somebody prepared to move this?
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, councillor Ivor. Is there a second? Deputy Mayor, is there any questions on this meeting? No questions? If not, I'll
Just to confirm, it's probably just the minutes of the 20th of July, not the agenda for the 7th of September.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr Mayor, in the index, and there's no number on the side to indicate 13.9.
Nine is there.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
If you need a
Just
Just wasn't.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I wrote mine in pencil, so it's just, yeah. Okay, moving right along. We come to our next lot of public questions. Are there any questions?
I'd just like to initially, my name's Melissa Wells. I put a complaint into the Integrity Commission in May, on the 19th of May this year. The Integrity Commission has done an assessment and they have come back with it. It's a 4-page document. I now don't have to have the confidentiality clause on it, but I would just like to direct the councillors to the conclusion. As noted, I have determined that the complainant may not be accepted into investigation and do not intend to take any further action on the matter. That does not mean that your complaint lacked merit. The complaint required careful consideration of the issues you raised. As a result, I have drawn the attention of the Circulating Council to several issues of good practice that Council may wish to consider.
You got a question? No.
Yes, please note that we will advise Councillor Pullen and the Deputy Mayor of the determination. Please be advised that the Section 98 confidentiality provisions attached to the notice addressed to you by the assessor no longer apply. So I do have a copy here for each. I'll give you one, Daniel Summers. I just feel that is all should be made aware of this. I won't give one to the Mayor or to the Deputy Mayor because they have already received theirs from the Integrity Commission.
I need a question because you haven't given us a question yet.
Yep, I'm just popping this out first. It does involve names of some of the councillors in there. I'd just like to directly point out that I didn't specifically deal with any councillor in relation to this, but I was pinpointing the Mayor, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Kokoski and Councillor Blizzard. Specifically, I wasn't relating it in regards to any of the other councillors. That's just where I'm personally coming from. I now have a question to do with an email I received from James Brewer. Hi Melissa, thanks for your inquiry regarding the replacement of the Jaggers Road Bridge. I can confirm the following. Jaggers Road is maintained by council for a distance of approximately 1.6 kilometres from the junction of Leeson's Road. The length of Jaggers Road is 3.3 kilometres. My question is, Jaggers Road is part of the LRCI funding, and I was actually in correspondence with Daniel Summers on the specific days of the 10th of September, the 8th of September and the 9th of September, and he stated to me that he hadn't been given approval for that project. I went to Jaggers Road on Saturday and the bridge has been built. The road has been graded and it has been graded all 3.3 kilometres of that road. Council only owns 1.6 kilometres of that road. Why is the council maintaining and grading a road that leads to private property or sustainable timbers at the cost of the ratepayer?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I've taken that question from you today and asked our works manager what activity council had done down that road in terms of grading. What I've got back is there was a grade and resheet on the 1.6 kilometre section. The grader returned through the gate, used private property to turn around and tidying up wheel marks or any scuff marks made by the grader in doing so. And that was put to me that occurred in August.
Okay. So now my other question is in regards to the agri-tax lease. That was on the agenda of last month and I did ask a question in relation to it. It was taken on board by the Deputy Mayor. I did receive an answer to that. That answer is that Mayor Cullen did remove himself from the council during the discussions, that the land at Grant Street is now on a month-by-month lease continuous with Agritas. Council has yet to decide what the future of this arrangement will be. I am unable to commit a timeframe in which that decision will be made, but I will be hopeful this will be decided before the end of the year. So my question is, why was the DA granted for the Agritas Duck River Meadows project on the pretence that the 20 hectare block that the council owned and leased to Agritas, part of that, and if you're only doing it on a month-to-month lease continuously, how does that then say that the Agritas Duck River Meadows project is viable if you choose to remove the 20 hectare portion of that DA agreement that was granted on the fact that it had that portion of land, the council portion of land, and also the next portion?
I won't be answering that.
I'll take that on notice and find out, because I believe I have information for that later. I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Alright, thank you.
Okay, now I need another motion to, there's no other questions, there's no other sleep answers, so one back. The council resolve by absolute majority that matters listed below be considered in closed meeting.
So moved.
Thanks, councillor Aldager.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Ives Harris, put the recommendation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Another one, that council resolved by absolute majority to close the meeting to the public.
So moved.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried.